The storm had not simply arrived that night. It had devoured it whole. What should have been an ordinary evening in the small town was transformed into a battlefield of nature's fury. The sky split open with rage, spilling rivers of water that turned the cracked streets into rushing streams. Wind howled like a wild beast, tearing at the rooftops and rattling the loose shutters of every house. The rain was relentless, hammering the pavement so hard it seemed as though the earth itself would split. Above, lightning ripped across the heavens in jagged white scars, each flash bright enough to burn the town into stark black and white for a heartbeat before the crushing roar of thunder shook the ground beneath their feet. Through that violent storm stumbled a boy of only 11. His name was Ethan Carter, and though his arms and legs trembled with exhaustion, he would not stop. His thin back was bent forward beneath the fragile weight of his little sister. Anna, only 7 years old, clung to him like a shadow, her small hands clutching at his soaked shirt. Her jeans were stained dark with blood, a deep gash in her leg leaving a crimson trail that vanished the instant it hit the rain-washed ground. Ethan could feel her uneven breaths against his neck, each one a reminder of the time slipping through his fingers. Beside them bounded Ranger, their loyal German shepherd. His black and tan coat was slick and plastered against his frame, but his stride never faltered. The dog barked again and again, sharp and fierce, his voice cutting through the storm like a flare in the night. His amber eyes burned with focus, darting left and right as if he could ward off danger by sheer will. Every bound of his paws was both a warning and a promise that no matter how brutal the storm became, the children would not be abandoned. Ethan's lungs burned with every gasp of the icy air. His sneakers slapped the waterlogged road, dragging heavier with every step, but his grip around Anna's legs only grew tighter. His hazel eyes squinted through the sheets of rain, desperate for a glimmer of safety, a light in a window, a door left open. But house after house stood dark, their blinds shut tight, their inhabitants buried in silence. Not a curtain stirred, not a soul stirred. To the boy, it felt like the entire world had turned its back on them. Anna whimpered faintly, her voice nearly lost beneath the roar of the storm. "Ethan, it hurts." "I know," he whispered. Though his own voice shook, he tilted his head toward her, his breath hot against the rain. "Just hold on, just a little longer." He didn't dare let his pace slow. The storm raged on, merciless and wild, and yet so did they, an exhausted boy, a bleeding child, and a dog that refused to abandon them. Together they pressed deeper into the night, 3 fragile sparks of hope against a storm that seemed determined to snuff them out. But the storm outside was not the only one the Carter children had known. Long before the flood swallowed the streets, there had already been storms in their lives, storms that howled within the thin walls of their fragile home. Their trailer sat at the far edge of a forgotten park, a sagging aluminum box weathered by years of neglect. Its siding was dented, its windows fogged with age, and the front steps groaned like an old man beneath the slightest weight. Weeds grew through the gravel lot, as if nature itself wanted to reclaim the ground. Inside, space was cramped, the air heavy with the sour smell of spilled beer and damp clothing. Their father had once been strong. In another life, he had been a carpenter, his hands steady and proud as he built homes for others. But that man had disappeared years ago after a brutal construction accident left his back twisted and his spirit shattered. What remained was a shell, slouched in a worn recliner, clutching bottles as though they were lifelines. The tools that had once been his pride lay rusting in the corner, covered in dust, reminders of a man long gone. Anna, still young enough to cling to hope, often asked questions about the father she could barely remember. Ethan, however, had learned not to ask. At only 11, He had already become the one who washed the dishes piled in the sink, who cooked simple meals from boxes, who tucked Anna into bed when their mother wasn't home. He had grown into responsibility faster than childhood had allowed. There, Mother Maria was the only fragile thread keeping them afloat. She worked endless shifts at a garment factory on the far side of town, rising before dawn and returning long after midnight. Her pay was meager, her body worn, but her will unbroken. Her tired smile at the door each night was a reminder that she hadn't given up, even if life gave her little reason to hope. Through it all, there was Ranger. The German Shepherd had once belonged to a neighbor who moved away, leaving him behind, but with the Carters, he had found his true family. For Ethan and Anna, he wasn't just a pet. He was their shield, their constant companion, their silent guardian against a world that too often turned cruel. That night, as the storm beat against the trailer roof like 1,000 angry fists, the family sat together in unease. A single bulb flickered weakly in the kitchen, its light barely keeping the shadows at bay. Their father slumped in the recliner, a half-empty bottle dangling from his hand, the glow of the TV painting his unshaven face in sickly blues. His muttered curses filled the air, words sharp enough to keep both children on edge. At the kitchen table, Ethan nudged a plate of boxed macaroni toward Anna. She swung her small legs beneath the chair, her golden hair tangled and messy, her eyes wide and searching his face for comfort. She tried to smile, but the tension in the room pressed against her shoulders. Ranger lay stretched across the floor, his amber eyes fixed firmly on the man in the recliner. Every clink of glass made the dog's ears twitch, his muscles coiling tighter. He was ready, waiting, watching. Ethan kept his voice soft, urging Anna to eat, even though he himself had no appetite. He knew the rhythm of these nights well, the fragile quiet that wasn't peace, but a silence so thin it could shatter at any moment. Outside, the wind howled harder, slamming against the thin walls as if to warn them that something worse was coming, and it came suddenly, like storms always do. Their father lurched from the recliner, reaching for another bottle on the counter. His unsteady hand slipped, and the glass tumbled. It shattered across the floor, jagged shards glittering beneath the flickering light. For a frozen instant, no one moved. Then Anna gasped and stepped back from the table, straight onto a shard. Her cry was high and piercing, cutting through the storm outside. She stumbled into Ethan's arms, blood spilling quickly from her heel. It pooled dark against the pail. "Linoleum, spreading fast! She's bleeding!" Ethan's voice cracked, panic shredding his usual quiet. But their father only waved him off, sinking deeper into his chair. "She's fine. Just a scratch. Stop the noise." His words slurred, soaked in indifference. Anna sobbed into Ethan's shirt, her small hands trembling as crimson stained the floor. Ethan pressed a dish towel against the wound, but the blood kept seeping. His hazel eyes flicked toward the door. He knew. If he stayed, she might not last the night. "We're leaving," he whispered fiercely, his words meant for Anna, for himself, and maybe even for Ranger, who had risen, hackles stiff and ears forward. He tied the towel tight, then crouched and lifted Anna onto his back. His body shook under her weight, but his determination was stronger. He pushed the door open and the storm rushed in like a living beast, clawing at them with wind and water. Ethan stepped into ankle-deep flood, his sneakers sinking as mud and debris swirled around him. Behind, their father shouted drunkenly, but he did not rise. He would not follow. Ranger dashed ahead, barking furiously, paws splashing through the torrent. Ethan staggered toward the nearest trailer, pounding on the metal door. "Help us! Please!" His voice cracked. Silence. He banged harder. "She's hurt. We need help." But every window stayed dark. Every curtain stayed shut. Behind those walls, warmth and safety existed, but not for them. Ethan's knuckles stung, but no help came. Adjusting Anna higher on his back, he muttered, "We'll do it ourselves." His words trembled, but they carried the weight of resolve. The road ahead was no longer a road, but a river. Water rushed high and dark, pulling broken branches and debris in its current. A street lamp cast its glow across the flood, shattering into shards of gold each time the waves surged. Ethan froze. The current reached his knees already. If it was strong enough to sweep a grown man, what chance did he have with Anna on his back? "I can't," he whispered, fear clawing at him. Anna's tears wet his shirt, her body trembling against his. And then, Ranger leapt first. The dog plunged into the current, muscles taut, testing the depth. He braced himself against the raging water, amber eyes locked on Ethan. Then he turned back, barking sharply, his amber eyes fixed on Ethan as if commanding. "Follow me!" Ethan swallowed hard, adjusted Anna on his back, and stepped in. The water hit him like ice, forcing a gasp from his lungs. Each step sank deeper, the current tugging hard at his legs. His thin frame trembled, his shoes slipping on the hidden gravel below. Halfway across his foot slid, his body pitched sideways and a scream piercing through the storm. For a terrifying heartbeat, he felt himself falling. Then, Ranger lunged back. The dog clamped his teeth onto Ethan's soaked shirt, pulling with desperate strength. Ethan staggered, regained his footing, clutching Anna tighter. "Good boy! Don't let go!" he cried, his voice breaking. With Ranger beside him, they pushed forward, step by agonizing step, until at last Ethan stumbled onto the opposite curb. He collapsed to his knees, Anna still clinging to him, her bloodied foot trembling against. Hisside. Ranger shook the water from his coat, then pressed his massive head against Ethan's shoulder, steadying him once more. The storm howled on, but the three of them had crossed. For the first time that night, survival felt possible. By the time Ethan reached the small brick building at the edge of town, his legs were shaking so hard he thought they might give out beneath him. The Red Cross painted above the door glowed faintly in the storm, a beacon through sheets of rain. He staggered forward, Anna, still clinging weakly to his back, her head resting limply on his shoulder, his fist pounded against the clinic's glass door. "Help us, please." His voice cracked, hoarse sorrow from shouting against the storm. Inside, the light flickered on. A nurse hurried to the entrance, her eyes widening as she caught sight of the drenched boy, the bleeding girl, and the massive German shepherd, snarling beside them. The door slid open and warm air rushed out. Ethan nearly collapsed as he stepped through, but the moment the nurse reached for Anna, Ranger lunged. His growl was low, dangerous, his body planted firmly between the children and the strangers. The nurse froze, hands raised in fear. "Easy, boy," she whispered. But Rares's teeth glinted under the harsh light, his muscles coiled. Anna stirred, her eyelids fluttering. She lifted a trembling hand, brushing her fingers against Rares's wet fur. "Ranger, it's okay," she whispered weakly. The dog froze, ears flicking back. His growl softened into a whine. Slowly he stepped aside, never taking his eyes off the nurse but granting her passage. The nurse rushed forward, calling out for the doctor. Together they lifted Anna onto a stretcher, pressing fresh bandages to her wound. Ethan swayed on his feet, his vision blurring. He felt Ranger press against his leg, steadying him. For the first time that night, the boy let himself believe they had reached safety. The clinic room smelled of antiseptic, sharp and clean, a jarring contrast to the storm outside. Anna lay on a narrow bed, her leg wrapped in fresh bandages, her breathing shallow but steady. Ethan sat beside her, drenched clothes clinging to his thin frame, his hands trembling in his lap. The doctor, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes, knelt to check Anna's pulse. "She'll be all right," he murmured, though his brow furrowed with worry. Then he looked at Ethan. "Son, how did this happen?" Ethan froze. His gaze dropped to the floor, words tangled in his throat. Ranger pressed against his side, warm and solid, as if urging him to speak. Finally, his voice cracked. It was my dad. He was drunk. He dropped the bottle. Anna stepped on the glass. He didn't care. He told us to be quiet. His hazel eyes filled with tears. If I hadn't brought her here, she... His voice broke completely. The doctor's jaw tightened. He rose swiftly, gesturing to the nurse. Call the sheriff now. Minutes later, the door opened. A young officer entered, rain dripping from her uniform jacket. She was no older than 30, her dark hair tied back, her expression firm but gentle. She crouched to meet Ethan's frightened eyes. You're safe now, she said softly. I promise Noon is going to hurt you or your sister while I'm here. Ethan's lips trembled. He clutched Ranger's fur, then broke into sobs that shook his thin shoulders. For the first time that night, the weight of silence lifted. The storm outside had eased to a heavy drizzle when the pounding on the clinic door began. It wasn't the wind this time. It was fists, heavy and insistent. Open up. Those are my kids. A voice slurred, rough and angry. Ethan stiffened, his hazel eyes darted toward the door, dread tightening his chest. Anna whimpered, clutching Rears's thick fur as she buried her face against his neck. The German shepherd's body went rigid, a low growl vibrating from deep in his chest. The young officer stepped forward, her hand hovering near her holster. She nodded to the nurse, who reluctantly unlocked the door. Their father stumbled inside, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket soaked with rain. His eyes darted toward the children, and he forced a smile that didn't reach his face. There you are. I was worried sick. His voice wavered, the false concern, breaking under the weight of alcohol. Ethan rose from his chair, legs trembling, but steady enough to stand in front of Anna. We're not going back, he said, his voice thin but fierce. The man's smile collapsed. Don't you talk to me like that, boy. He stepped forward, but Ranger lunged, barking so loud the walls seemed to shake. His teeth bared, his stance unyielding. The man froze, stumbling back in shock. Enough, the officer barked. She moved swiftly, grabbing his arm, twisting it behind his back. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut cut through the room, sharp and final. Their father cursed, struggled, but the fight was already gone from him. Ranger barked again, this time not in mourning, but in victory. Anna lifted her tear-streaked face from Ariar's fur. For the first time, her eyes held something new, relief. The weeks that followed carried a different kind of storm, one made of change. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors who had once kept their curtains closed now opened their doors, bringing food, blankets, and quiet words of comfort. A church group donated furniture, and an old mechanic repaired the family's broken car without charging a cent. Their mother, Maria, left the factory night shifts behind. With help from the community, she started selling bread and pastries at the town market. The hours were long, the income modest, but she was home in the evenings, her lauder returning little by little. Ethan no longer carried the weight of the world alone. He began to walk to school every morning with Anna, his backpack slung over one shoulder instead of heavy responsibilities. Anna's leg healed slowly, leaving only a thin scar, a reminder of survival rather than weakness. And Ranger, he became Morthan, a pet. Children on the street called him the guardian dog, running up to pat his head as he trotted proudly beside Ethan and Anna. The mayor even pinned a small medal to his collar at a community gathering, though Ranger only wagged his tail, content, so long as his two humans were safe. One bright spring morning, the three of them stepped out of their modest new home. The cherry trees lining the street bloomed pink above, petals scattering in the breeze. Ethan held Anna's hand, guiding her toward the school gates. Ranger padded beside them, his ears pricked, his tail swaying like a silent promise. For the first time, their steps carried not just survival, but hope. Hope that tomorrow could be different, that storms could pass, and that even broken families could find new beginnings.